Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in and welcome to our new episode of Life After Islam. I am really appreciative for everyone that has been supporting this initiative and Faithless Hijabi. If you're looking to support me, you can find my Patreon link in the description below. Alternatively, if you're looking to support our new program, our new mental health program for ex-Muslims, not only women, we have some men in the program as well for their therapy sessions. Visit the website faithlesshijabi.org/support us. Just to introduce what Life After Islam is before I introduce my guest, Life After Islam is a segment that is built out of my curiosity to understand where different ex-Muslims come from, their backgrounds, their journeys, their progress, and most importantly, how we have our experiences overlapping each other. The idea is definitely to normalize apostasy and amplify the voices of those who dissent, like in us. I am really excited to have her, and I feel like we should have spoken earlier because I have seen a lot of her work. I think born out of curiosity, but experience as well, opening doors for people in Europe who have who do not quite understand the honor culture, who, Ines herself has lived by being in the community and understanding the wider context of, how, coming from an Arab background in Sweden, you kind of don't fit into one hat. And, you can't be, if she, I feel like I'm saying her story for her, but all I can say is that sometimes you're told you're not Swedish enough, or sometimes you're told you're not Arab enough. And I think I've had this growing up as well, and it's so common. So I'm really excited to introduce her. Ines, please tell us a fun fact about you and a little more about your background.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm so excited to be on your podcast, and I love your initiative with everything you do. And I'm excited to have an interesting discussion with you. So, a fun fact about me: I think my followers who have tuned in would be very disappointed if I don't say that I hate Ayn Rand. That's a fun fact about me. I have a passionate hate for Ayn Rand, and it can be explained rationally, but it's also an irrational anger towards her that cannot be explained.
Well,
uh, and
I feel like you'll have to tell me more about her. But I feel like this will come up in the conversation anyway. So, more about your background.
yes, so my name is Inas Hamdan. I'm 21 years old and I live in southern Sweden. Often people come up to me and are like, "Where are you? Have you lived in Sweden your whole life?" And I'm like, "No, but I came here when I was 7 months old." So it's always like an awkward pause there, where like, "Am I born in Sweden? Can I count it as I'm born in Sweden?" But it's not
Yeah.
really that. So I've lived in Sweden my whole life, in Malmö, the
Yeah.
scary, scary city, Malmö.
Ooh.
And
I've been to
I've grew
Malmö.
up in a yeah, it's a lovely city, isn't it?
Yeah.
I hope
Yeah,
you
the
agree.
bridge, Brun, the bridge.
Yeah, yeah. And I've lived in a very, very segregated area in Malmö where like 99% of my classmates were from a Muslim background throughout my life until got to high school.
Yeah.
And today
Um,
I'm a
just before
journalist.
we just before we proceed, are you wearing earphones?
Yeah.
Okay, can you disconnect them and connect them back? I can hear you fine, but somebody in the audience have said that they can't hear you, so we'll just try this.
Testing.
Yeah, this is better.
Yay.
Okay. Yeah, this definitely is better.
Great. Well,
Sorry, so I
yeah.
interrupted you. You're from Malmö.
Yes. And today I study at Lund University and I work as a journalist and a columnist for some papers here in Sweden, but also some international magazines.
Yeah. Um, So, what are you currently studying? Are you also studying journalism? Is that an area you're looking to get into?
Well, I've decided to take a slightly different route when it comes to my writing and journalism. I'm studying a program called Politics, Philosophy, and Economics, which is like a program that really covers many interesting subjects. And I think having that knowledge when I walk into the workplace will be much more important than like knowing how to call the government or get out information, because that
Yeah.
you can get a lot easily, more
Yeah.
easily. So that's my first step right now.
Yeah, and it also broadens your field as well. In the future, if
Absolutely.
you decide to get into something different, or whether it be continuing down politics or even in business psychology, because you'll be studying economics and government entities. I mean, that's as far as my knowledge goes about it. But I am interested to learn about what you're writing and how. So I know you'll and how and why you have that interest of writing, and then a bit more about how you were raised and getting into that realm itself.
Absolutely. So, um, I have always loved writing, and for me, it's like a way to express. I'm a very introverted but very observative person, so I usually use writing to get out what I see and think about, and yeah, just observe in my surrounding. And for a while, it was on social media. I used Twitter a lot to get out thoughts while growing up in my early teens. And through that, I realized that I actually had a voice that could be useful.
Sorry, hang on. I think we may have lost her. I know I'm still streaming. I am going to text her while we're waiting. But if you guys have any suggestions on who I should have next, that would be amazing. Let me know who I should have next. I do have a few people in mind, but I'm curious to see what my viewers are like and what they have or what they're waiting for, and what other topics should we cover. I know we talk a lot about Islam, but I feel like it always branches out to different topics, be it our views on the political side of Islam, or our experiences and it goes into either a philosophical side or more emotional side. So I'm open to either way. Let me know who should come on. We have you back.
Yes, hi, I'm
Oh,
sorry for
no,
that.
no, all
The
good.
internet should be better now.
No, all good. Go for it. Sorry. So you were talking about, um, I think let's just start into how you started writing or how you got into this career of yours.
Yeah. So yeah, I mostly use social media, and I realized that a lot of my surrounding didn't really confirm, like didn't really wasn't really like the majority of the surroundings in my country, in my in, like the whole Western world, and that was quite eye opening for me, and I wanted to talk about my experiences. So I started writing about everything in my life, and the reason my upbringing differed from many around me is because I, as I said, grew up in a Muslim household in a very segregated area of Sweden, where 99% of my classmates were from a Muslim background, and that uh, that upbringing in a culture, or in a culture within a system that don't align with this. So the Swedish law is very secular and liberal, and open and accepting. And I grew up in a very close-minded culture where uh, much of what the West has fought for and long forgotten that they have fought for still is a battle
Yeah.
that is ahead of us.
Did you feel like growing up that, you were a different person in school and then you come home and you're a different person because you're just in a different environment and that you had, or maybe, I don't know if you did, but you struggled with finding that balance into like, I guess what would be the Swedish in you versus the home Arab girl that you're meant to be?
Well, the biggest issue I think with segregation is that it removes that internal questioning. So because my school was mostly all from my background,
Yeah,
and because everyone around me uh, were pretty much more oppressed than me, or like lived with more constraints than me, or like the equal amount as me, it was sometimes even so that I had more freedom at home than in the Swedish state school that was meant to install democratic and freedom within the students.
yeah,
And the reason for that is not because of the Swedish school, like the Swedish school is oppressive or stupid,
regressive.
or
Yeah,
it's more because of the surrounding. Like students learn much more from each other than they learn in the classroom when the teacher sits and tells you to memorize countries or whatever. And the Swedish school has actually done a lot to challenge students. And if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have decided to think for myself.
yeah.
But I was really, really influenced by my surrounding of students and classmates.
So, do you think that a lot of the students, because they came from South Asian backgrounds and Middle Eastern backgrounds, that there was resistance because of their culture? Because of your culture, I guess.
Yeah, like in Malmö, we have a lot of people from different backgrounds. And if you
Yeah,
go to the inner city, you'll see people from all backgrounds, all ethnicities, all religions working together, and they have a common nationality of being Swedish. But then the issue arises with migration when you have segregated areas where people from the same culture
yeah,
get together. And that is the issue that came up in my upbringing,
yeah,
because my school was like student kids regurgitate what their parents teach them, and
yeah,
that meant that school was filled with homophobia, sexism, anti-Semitism, and all different kinds of awful mindsets that the Swedish society has a zero tolerance for, really.
So I guess I know we're going to get into our discussion soon, but I will bring it back to you. But so thinking about, do you think it is, I feel like it's unfair that if refugees are coming in, you tend to cluster them together because you're like, they feel homely because, it's their community. And I feel like that is exactly where we have failed with integration programs because we're not actually helping them fit into the real life in Sweden versus they're creating this illusion or the reality that's their own, and then they become an insulated community. And that is, I feel like, the biggest problem in a lot of countries, if not all countries that have refugees that come in. What are your thoughts on it?
Let me answer that by giving you telling you about a project I worked on a reportage in the newspaper I work at. It's about migrant women who have been here for over 20 years and still do not speak the language. How can that be that an adult person can live in a country for 20 years without knowing the language? Well, That's because we put them in these segregated areas,
Yeah.
and their husbands are the ones who go out and work,
Yeah.
and then they are stuck in an environment where they do not know the language. The husband is a controller in the relationship. He is her everything for the outside world. And because she doesn't know about the systems, the laws, the everything, she cannot ask for help. She cannot even dream of freedom.
Yeah.
And that is an example for how horrible it is to open your doors to migrants and
Yeah.
just then piling them in and ignoring what is actually best for them.
Yeah, and I think this is exactly how you're establishing a patriarchal culture in a country that is not meant to be patriarchal, because you are still giving men that power by making women, by letting the women be submissive. And I'm not saying that you should empower women to fight their husbands. I'm saying you should empower women to have equal, that there has to be some standard that every person, especially if you're a new immigrant and you're an adult, that you need to have a test on this and you need to learn Swedish. And then in 5 years, you have another test before you get your, I guess, permanent residency outside of that, to see that you know the language, that you know the culture,
Mm,
that we're actually, that we actually care about the growth in the society when we have refugees in, not that, oh, we're taking them in and then don't give a shit about them, because I feel like then you're just doing wrong by them. You're not giving them
mm,
a better life, you're giving them a worse life, because they're unable to fight for their freedom. They don't know the primary language or the culture or what their rights are.
mm.
And
Exactly.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because it's such a, it's a huge issue when, you know, we talk about, and this will go back to your article on the non-white white feminist,
Yeah.
um, which feel like it's so unfair that we have different standards of feminism for women of color and for white women. Why would we do that? It is insulting. It is insulting to the word feminism. It is insulting to every woman who isn't of white color. And I feel like those are also standards not only emphasized by white feminists, but also other feminists who are like, oh, but you know, this is our culture and this is how we want to be empowered, versus these are our rights no matter what color we are. What are your thoughts? I guess when you wrote about that article, you had a specific example of what had happened. Um,
Yeah.
I want to understand what, like, with that example and other examples, which I feel like they'll be overlapping in common. What are your views on, I guess, intersectional feminism, and how have you specifically been um, affected by it?
Uh, very happy that you brought that up because I think that many, when they hear the headline, I'm a non-white white feminist, they will be like, "What is this postmodern bullshit?" and
The labels.
exactly. But I actually wrote that headline to point out the absurdity of the labels that are being used in today's society. So, what I wrote about in that article, for those who haven't read it, it's on RU Magazine. Uh, I wrote about an incident where I was called by a white girl. I was called a white feminist, and that's like it was. She was in college, like in university, and that's not a big deal. Like she is an individual, and she said something that wasn't the best, but the fact that she had the impulse to say it
Yeah,
was what triggered me to write this because she later on caught the irony of she, a white feminist, calling me a white feminist. So
yeah,
she was like, "Oh, that's not what I meant. I meant you're a liberal feminist."
yeah.
And
But there is some truth to that, though. I mean,
what?
there is, to the fact that she said you're a white feminist shows that how far behind or how regressive feminism has become.
Yes,
Because the
exactly.
fact that she's saying you're a liberal feminist, and like, isn't all feminism meant to be liberating for women? Like,
Exactly.
so when she, like, obviously, I don't think you took offense to that, but I think it gave you a moment of like, what is she saying? She is correct.
Yes,
Like, she's correct
exactly.
because people like me have, stripped other women of their rights. Like, people like, and I don't mean you, but like, I mean people of our color and other
Yeah,
Muslim feminists, because I think even as being ex-Muslims, we're still categorized to have similar values or similar standards of freedom as Muslim women. I think that's changing now. So, oh my God, there's so much to talk to you about this. So sorry, go on. So I guess that article that you wrote, how did, like, I guess, what were your thought processes? Like, you wrote that for a reason. What
yeah,
change were you thinking of bringing after that? Because I feel like there's so much you can touch upon that.
absolutely. So, first of all, what I was trying to touch on is exactly what you bring up, that all feminism should be liberal. Like, uh, for me, the fact that you could have the end goal should always be female empowerment and freedom, and the fact that we today prioritize the being scared of being called racist and let women fall victims for oppressive cultures because of that fear. That really breaks my heart because a lot of women who are in these cultures are so covered by it, blinded by it, that they can't even dream of freedom because freedom is painted as oppression.
Yeah.
And then the forces who are powerful, the Western forces who are powerful enough to send the signal to these women so that they can dream of freedom, what they do is they tell them, yes, you are free. Maybe our culture is what has issues in it. And absolutely, Western culture has issues in it. But we should not relativize what the
Exactly.
issues they face are compared to ours.
Yeah.
And then,
I
second, sorry, yeah.
Sorry, no, no, go on. I love that you're on a roll. Please go on.
Second of all, I wanted to bring up intersectionality, which is a brilliant concept for people who are fighting for change, because when we look at people from different backgrounds, we have to treat them as individuals. In the article we are speaking about, I come to the conclusion that intersectionality is actually liberalism because you treat every person as an individual. For
Yeah.
example, me, a brown female, I have more freedom right now than many women in that many women in Eastern Europe,
Yeah.
and that is not based on our race, but we have different factors in our
Yeah.
lives that should be taken into consideration. But the term
Yeah.
intersectionality has been misused, and it's today used as oppression Olympics, and I get painted as a victim no matter what I do.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, because obviously, like you said, the term has been misused. And when I was saying I feel like intersectional feminism has done wrong by me, I think I was using the because misused term. That's why I was like, can you clarify that? But I think I understand your position. That is exactly right. I think that makes a lot of sense that, um with my, I guess, misused term of intersectionality, I've always seen intersectionality as being something that is degrading for for women, because with I had seen that as different sects or different sections of women that you group them into have different rights,
Mm.
and there's no standard there, that we shouldn't hope to achieve that standard, that the fact that women in Saudi Arabia can drive, oh, that's a step forward, and here we are talking about not gender pay gaps, but like women getting jobs. Like, we're just so far ahead, not even just women getting jobs, but them having the right over their body,
Yeah,
them being able to wear what they want to. And then in Saudi Arabia, where like the rights that came to people 200 years ago are happening now. But what I see this as happening is, in countries like Saudi Arabia or the Middle East, changes are happening faster, not faster than they did before because
Yeah,
it took 50 years. But now that because this world is so far advanced that people are like, hey, hang on, we're not doing this enough. We're not doing it enough. Oh, driving is great. Okay, what about male guardianship laws? Otherwise, if we had to look at it at the standard of like 200 years ago, it would have taken us 10 years between driving and male guardianship laws. What do you think?
exactly. And something I want to touch upon here is that when a feminist in the Western world comes to you and says the biggest issue I fight for is that periods should be not be a shameful thing, or like they say something that might seem trivial for somebody who is facing actual oppression, I think, and that might be controversial, that is something that should be celebrated, because that shows us how great it is to be in an actual equal society. Sure, every country still has work to do, but how amazing is it that women in these areas can focus making on breaking the norm on about speaking about your period, or
Yeah,
speaking about hair growth on women and stuff
yeah,
like that, when other women have much bigger issues in front of them. But
yeah.
where the issues arises
Hmm.
is when these same women who are enjoying such freedoms actively act to make it more difficult for the more oppressed women to get freedom.
Give me an example of that.
Well, one very good example is, I think, the idea about the hijab always being one's own choice.
Mhm.
These women can't even imagine a scenario where a woman gets forced to wear the hijab.
Yeah,
And I understand their reaction to do so, because my little sister wears a hijab. She gets some very bad comments every now and again, and she shows it freely. As you can see, I'm not wearing my hijab. My older sister doesn't wear the hijab, but she does, and
yeah,
that should like prove that she at some level chose to wear it freely, and she also wears it along with Metallica shirts, and she has an awesome emo style that
yeah.
goes against every Islamist's worst dream, and but she still gets hate from some horrible people
Hmm.
around the society.
Do you mean
And
do you mean hate for wearing her Metallica shirt or not being
no,
Muslim enough, or the other way around?
actually both, but now I'm focusing on the other way around, the actually bigoted part
Hmm.
of people in hijabs.
Yeah.
And for me, that then it's natural that women will be like, don't do that, what the fuck, like let her wear whatever she want, it was clearly her choice.
Hmm.
But then uh, in their attempt to help women
Hmm.
like my sister and other women that are oppressed because they choose to wear the hijab, they forget all the women who are not choosing it freely, who
Yeah.
are programmed into a mindset where not wearing the hijab means being impure, or uh, um, it means that you will go into hell,
Yeah.
and that is an issue. And that is a great example to how on how uh, more free women can stand in the way for the fight for feminism.
Okay, so I have changed my views on hijab quite a bit. Um, but previously I was like, oh yeah, women choose to wear it. My sisters, all my sisters and my nieces wear hijab, right? They
Yeah.
can't ever see without it. Some of them live in the West and, they still wear it. And then I was like, I never had a choice, so I don't think they did either. So I think it was important for me to clarify, what did a choice mean? Like what are we constituting as a choice? There are many people right now in their adults, they wake up every day, they put it on, and some of them are happy about it. I would say a lot of them could be happy about it if they're going out. And some of them not so much, right? So if we look at the group that are happy about it, like your sister, for instance, and that would include my siblings as well, And I was like, but it was never a choice when they put it on. Like their decision to not wear the hijab was never a choice because, like you said, they're so programmed to think about it. But they are actively waking up and not fighting it. They are actively waking up and going like, oh, I still want to wear it because, now that you have taken off hijab, I have taken off hijab. My younger sister taking it off wouldn't be a bigger deal as, the first person who takes it off has it. So
Exactly.
I feel like people can't seem to have a nuanced conversation because I was previously like, oh, people can choose to. And then I went like, oh, it's never a choice. And I'm like, I think it's important that we clarify what is a choice. Like, what exactly are
I,
we talking about? Because
I
right now, your sister, I don't know about her, but like looking at my sister, yeah, well, they technically started wearing it at 8 and they didn't really have a choice, but they are waking up right now and not fighting it. And I
mm,
have been so anti-hijab, so they know my stance on it, and they know why I think that. I had a post that said, um, "When I wore the hijab, I felt empowered sometimes,
mm,
but it wasn't a choice." So I wanted to clarify what the illusion of empowerment means to people who wear it, because until I was 16, all I knew in my head was that Muslim women wear hijab. I didn't know you could take it off. So to see that there are icons on TVs and programs and whatnot of Muslim girls wearing it, previously I hated it. I hated it so much because I was like, that's not fair. An 8-year-old is pushed to wearing hijab. And I would still argue that as long as there are kids wearing hijab um, in the TV show or whatever cartoon it is, you're not saying it's a choice. You're saying this is what, there's representation. So I'm a bit conflicted here because I like the representation because growing up I would have been that child watching that cartoon and going like, oh, okay, so she can drive, or like well, I could drive, but like she can go to school, she can work in a bank, she can wear a hijab and do this, and it's great. And then there are other times when I'm like, imagine that this is all they see. Imagine that this is so normal for them that they don't know anything about the revelation of it.
yeah.
That Yeah. So I was like, what are your views on like defining a choice and I guess the representation of Muslims in modeling or Muslim hijab wearers in modeling, Olympics and other, I guess, other sport.
I can say this that I fully understand that conflict you had, because I think a lot of people who question uh, these norms coming from Islam go through exactly that. And I also had this journey of like thinking and reasoning about the subject of hijab. If First of all, I want to say this, that it's so interesting to me that the people who are so norm critical and find the patriarchy in every single corner of society can't see patriarchy in the hijab. It is such a sad state of affairs when patriarchy looks you in the eyes and you say this is freedom. And anyone who does that, I think, is has done a disservice to the fight for freedom.
Yeah.
But I also had a hijab once, and I have taken it off. And I actually put it on when I was around 14 years old, and it was my choice to do so. My mom was like, Inas, why would you do this? She actually put it on in her 30s.
Hmm.
And everybody around me was like, are you sure you want to do this? You know that you can't take it off afterwards. This is a permanent choice. But the
All of
issue
us
with,
were told that permanent choice. That's what my mom told me. It just
yeah.
like exactly those words, like you can't take it off. So if you put it on, I was like,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, I'm sure. So what
Yeah.
was? Yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, but then I changed my mind around like the age of, I actually didn't wear it. I wore it for a couple of years and changed my mind. Um, I removed it, and that actually was a really difficult thing to do for a teenager.
Hmm.
Um, I lost friends. I've always had this, good girl mentality that I lost from my family and friends or relatives. Um, and it was as a fight against honor culture when I didn't know that I was getting into. But thankfully, my family are very, very accepting.
Yeah.
Uh,
I'm
but
sure it
what
took a while. I'm sure it wasn't like, oh, okay, cool, you've taken it off.
exactly.
Yeah.
No, it was a very, very confused uh, thing because I actually put it on in what I thought was my fully informed choice.
Hmm.
Um, but let us also look at what you also spoke about choice. What choice does a woman have when you tell her all her life that without the hijab, she is dirty? That without the
She's
hijab,
impure.
she's impure. That without the hijab, she will burn in hell for eternity. It's like, oh, the robber gave you a choice. He gave you a choice between giving him your money or him killing you. It's
Yeah,
like
that was the
the
choice
same
he
amount
gave
of
you.
choice. Yeah.
No,
And
it's crazy how, like you said, what is a choice, right? If
yeah,
you're telling a woman that she's going to go to hell, is that a choice? Like, when people say hijab is there's no compulsion in religion. Oh yeah, because if you don't compel, you're gonna go to hell. Like,
exactly.
and whether or not you believe in hell is a very different question. Because like right now, if somebody, like, I don't believe in hell, but there's so many others that do, and that for those who do believe in hell, or those who are actually coming out as well, or people or young people who only know what an idea of hell is, not collecting evidence or anything to make that judgment, and they're like, oh, you're going to go to hell if you don't believe, you're going to go to hell if you don't wear hijab, you're going to go to hell if you don't pray, you're going to go to hell, you're going to go to hell, and that is your entire life based on
That's
fear.
your free choice.
That's your
Yeah.
free choice. That nobody
Yeah.
compelled you to be a Muslim. We only told you about hell so that you know the right path.
Exactly. But then to the point of representation, I was also very worried when I saw a lot of uh, Western media and opinion makers present the hijab as a choice and like made it normalized that a Muslim woman she wears the hijab. But I've actually changed my opinions there. Today, when I go online, I see young people drawing art of two hijabis kissing each other. I see art of uh, my biggest inspiration in this discussion is actually my little sister who has a very alternative style, and she wears her hijab as a turban and really actually like expresses her individuality through the hijab, and
Yeah.
she sees it a lot like a cultural thing.
Yeah.
uh, and whenever I love going out with her because we'll always see this conservative Muslim man or these Muslim women sitting there and they stare at her and they are offended.
Yeah.
And that is what I want to underline here. Women in hijab that fight against the religious oppression
Yeah.
are in the forefront of the
Yeah.
fight that we are trying to make. And they will always be the first targeted either by religious extremists or by racists.
Yeah.
And it comes with a lot of bravery to break religious norms while wearing the hijab. And
Yeah.
a prideful day I felt in this fight was in actually RuPaul's Drag Race, if somebody recognizes
Yeah.
that show, when uh, a drag queen, a gay man, danced to a Lady Gaga song in hijab.
Yeah.
And for me, that's amazing
Yeah.
because it made all the right people angry.
Yeah, I think like which was funny that there was more anger targeted towards the person asking a question
Yes,
versus the person going like, the person going like, oh, he didn't have an answer actually, but he was still there defending his right to wear it, to his right to be a representation, which was great. But I
Mm.
think both had would have gotten would have gotten worse criticism if that person was a woman,
Yeah,
especially if that person was a woman. I think that they would have gotten a lot more criticism.
absolutely. And
And by women I mean like a female, born female, because it always comes at a different cost. Always.
absolutely. And I want to put point there. Many people hated on the individual who asked, questioned the drag queen who was up in the hijab. But at the end, the drag queen, the person who asked the question, and the host, RuPaul, all agreed that
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is something great, and there was no different opinion between them. And a lot of people still was like, "Oh, he was racist when he asked that." No, he wasn't.
That was well, like I don't think anybody tried. I don't think the Muslims who were angry tried answering that question.
Mm.
They never tried answering that question. They were just like, oh, he assumed things about it. And I'm like, oh, really? I can show you the hadith where it says,
Mm.
throw great people off the roof.
Yeah,
The story of Lut. And if that's something you're going to support, if you're going to support religion over all of that, then you need to accept that your religion does not support it. Um,
exactly.
Sorry, I'm gonna bring this back to you now. This was amazing. Like, I feel like I can talk to you, and I feel like we'll still come back to it, back and forth. So, I guess you mentioned about growing up and your environment being more conservative, not at home, but like in the school level, how kids were influencing other kids, and that is basically a safeguarding issue because we have that in the UK as well during Ramadan, where we have progressive Muslims whose kids or moderate Muslims or barely Muslims who kids don't fast during Ramadan and then are forced to by other religious kids. And you're like, hey, hang on. Like, this shouldn't be happening. Like, the child's name could be like a younger Zahra or, a younger, like, Yusuf or anything. And then you're like, oh, why why are you basically attacking this person because they have that Arabic name? And that's
Exactly.
horrible because my own sister, like, when I left, she was about 11, no, she was about 10ish. She was bullied in school. She was bullied in madrasa. She's like, oh, you're an atheist sister. Like, why are you even here? Or like, oh, haha, shame on you. And I was like, that's actually a proud thing to be.
Yeah.
Like, I was just like, you were someone's sister who was defying so many laws. Um, I guess how was your experience being around that? Were you bullied for being different? Or
One I love to bring up is that I once made the bad mistake of saying uh, humans are animals, and like it's a very except like it's obviously
it's
we're
scientific yeah.
yeah, like we are an animal, but everybody went crazy. It was like you are saying God's creation is an animal. And they were like, "No, humans are not animals. We are humans." And I went back to them. We're like, "Okay, but horses are not animals. They are horses." And it was like a very absurd situation because like I was in eighth grade, I think, and at
Mhm.
that point I was like reading Dawkins and what people do, like the his book. What is that? The gene,
The selfish gene.
the selfish gene.
Yeah.
And like for me, the whole subject of biology and psychology was a new world, and I was reading it, and I bring up the least controversial point in the history of man,
Yeah.
and I get such backlash for that.
Yeah.
But if I also give an example from my work now, because I speak with a lot of girls who live in such conditions. I spoke with a teacher the
Mhm.
other days, and she told me that during Ramadan too, um, a lot of students don't dare to walk around chewing gum or
Mhm.
eating. And even in the school in Sweden here, we have the school gives food to children
Yeah.
during lunch, and there's like if a teacher or if a student or even a teacher eats um, non-halal meat. We don't serve halal meat, so it's vegetarian. If they eat non-vegetarian food, they get bullied. And she told me that students that might eat pork at home
Yeah.
register at vegetarian at school. And she also told me that there were a teacher who refused to eat with the students because he would actually get piled on by students. And like imagine 30 students around you telling you that you're doing something bad. Even the most strong-minded person will find that quite awful.
Wait, why would the teacher get piled on by student because he was eating pork?
Yeah, or just simply non-halal meat. Like he wasn't eating vegetarian, and he had a Muslim name or something like
Oh,
that.
wow, that is horrible. I mean,
Yeah.
imagine kids being bullied, bullies.
Yes.
Like,
No, but
what
it's
kind of
surprising.
parenting is that?
Yeah, and that's because the norm has been so normalized, actually.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, no, you're right. I think like I've seen some videos where you see one child talking to the other child and just like, "Oh my God, you're not praying for fasting. You're gonna go to hell, and you're not, and like you're going to burn so much in hell, and you're going to burn." And I'm like, these are kids who are 2 years old.
Yeah.
This is abuse. This is what you're teaching them. It's like putting them in a horror film and then all over again and again, and other kids putting other kids in a horror film. And I feel like this is how religion survives based on fear, a lot of the fear. And that's crazy.
And also religious expression also lives along through honor culture, through
Yeah,
the word aib,
yeah,
and that means shameful.
yeah,
Every family has their internal haram affairs hidden from everybody else,
yeah.
and
You,
together they
you,
bring up a facade that
yeah,
everybody is Muslim.
yeah. Um, you mentioned hijab and honor culture, which I feel a lot of people don't relate, and I do, because I was like, honor abuse is when you tell a woman that she should be wearing this to preserve your honor, and people don't see it that way because people see honor abuse as like people see acts of honor only when it goes to honor killing and
Yeah.
nothing that happens in the lifetime of people. So the research that I sent you, they talk about how women are neglected, that they go through suffering for 7 years before they're actually killed,
Mm.
or they go through it like their whole life before they're actually, very physically abused or even like dead.
I wanna I've spoken to you a bit about this, but I've been working on a big project right now, sadly for a Swedish paper, but about the gray zones of honor culture, and we have spoken to teachers and students about their views about honor culture, and we targeted primarily second generation women who have grown up in segregated areas,
Mhm.
and we've asked them, how did you experience your parents um, limitation, and what are your opinions on limitations? And what we discovered was that unsurprisingly for me and you probably, but surprisingly to many others, is that they embrace these limitations and take them further. So they will tell me like, oh, I didn't agree on with my dad that he didn't let me go to prom, but if my son was gay, I would not accept that. So we have realized that these kids who are grow up in honor culture
They tend
might
to
get more,
perpetuate.
but they might get a little bit more progressive, but not too much.
Yeah. Why do you think that's the case? Because the papers that I sent you, I don't know how far along did you read, but they talk about how women are the abusers and the victims as well, how they're secondary victims, and how usually they blame the mother for the acts of the daughter, but then also the mothers are the ones who instigated in the first place. The mothers are like, oh, you're not very, like, I think even with hijab, a lot of people, when you ask them about hijab, they'll go like, oh, it's the mothers telling them to wear it, not the brothers or the kids. sorry, not the brothers or the father, which is interesting, right? Because you would think that women would know better, but I feel like they continue that cycle of abuse because that's all they've known.
Absolutely. So the issue here is that these women learn, like you follow the same kind of morality you're learned, you're taught. I mean, and they bring it further because they think, oh well. The point I always try to make is that no human alive can go through their life thinking all day, I'm oppressed, I'm oppressed, I'm oppressed. Because if they do,
Mhm.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
If they do, they will go crazy.
Yeah,
So they try to normalize what they have learned. So
yeah,
by normalizing that, they will bring it further. And the human brain is very good at rationalizing, and they think it's good and bring it further.
yeah. I mean, I've actually had women who've gone like, when I talked about wife beating, and they're like, yeah, I would want my husband to beat me if I stepped out of line. And I'm like, what does step out of line mean? And they're like, oh, if I refuse to pray and something. So I'm like, you want your husband to beat you. Are you allowed to beat your husband? And they're like, oh, but he's stronger than I am. Why would I beat him? And I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, okay, that's how you rationalize it. It's almost as though, and not almost as though, it is because you've internalized that misogyny.
Exactly. So I also spoke with a lot of girls who are like, well, I wouldn't allow my father, my husband, to control me, but if because control me because of their opinions, but I invite them to control me because of religion. So if they can
Yeah.
point to a verse in the Quran,
Yeah.
then I would be very happy if my parents forced me or my husband forced me, and that's quite sad. And they are the issue is when you see them, they're happy, really happy with their life. So you can't tell them you're oppressed. But what we can hope to do is for future generations, make sure that they don't grow up the same way.
Yeah. I guess then what would your position be on, I think we spoke about this on Twitter. It would be nice to discuss this in detail. What would your position be on the banning of niqabs, hijabs, and then, specifically for kids or for adults in private institutions or in government? So like they're like six different, I feel like I've put a matrix up right now, like if this, if that. So I want to know where you stand on like all of it. What would your conditions be, or where, like, I guess, what are your views on each of them or all of them?
My issue with banning the hijab is that the hijab in itself is not the oppression. Like if you
Yeah.
had a culture with where like girls just put like a turban. The turban is not an oppression. Why
Yeah.
is the hijab an oppression? Because it has values come with it. My fear with banning the hijab is that you remove the sign for the government and people concerned to see that girls are oppressed. So if you have in schools,
Mhm.
uh, you force all girls to remove the hijab, how in hell will you know what is happening in the home? I've spoken also again to a lot of teachers who have told me that the hijab can be an important sign that something significant has happened in the home. And while some say, "Oh, but I chose that," it can be a moment where they can perk up their ears, and look at what is happening. And it has been very useful to save a lot of girls from forced marriages and oppression in the home. And I think that this value setting on the hijab itself makes it so that we want to hide the issue uh, by removing the hijab, and we're like, oh, we solved the problem, when in actuality we've just made it go deeper into darkness where we can't help these women.
Yeah. Um, it is interesting. I really did like your view on it, saying that it's not the hijab that's the question. It is the oppression behind it. It is the reasons behind it that is not being countered, because a lot of times the hijab, for the right wing who support the banning, It is a lot about, we don't want you here. So we don't want to see you here, because the reality is that there are many women who won't be allowed to wear the hijab in the country, might just be on house arrest. They might just never have to go out. And that's the reality of it. And that is hard and that is strong. But then also it removes a woman's agency. It removes a woman's choice of wearing it. It's like, now put me into this thing where I'm like, this is what I'm meant to do. I can't do this the way I want to do it.
And I want to point out there that if I lived in a Sweden that made the hijab illegal, I would be wearing it today because I would have victimized myself and seen the majority society as hateful. I would not have made strives to integrate into the majority society. I would have
Yeah.
closed up and turned my back on the society that wants to limit me from pursuing my religion, because that was my mindset at that time.
Yeah.
But through liberalism, through freedom, and through the support of majority society, that they showed me that they would be on my side if I chose to remove it. That is what made me dare to do that, not
Yeah.
force. And
Yeah.
that is something that we need to understand again and again. Humans don't get in line or change their opinion through force. They change
Yeah.
their opinion through through education,
Yeah.
through freedom, and through speaking with people who have made the right choices. And at the end of the day, the hijab is not the right choice, and we know that
Yeah.
objectively, I want to say. But
Yeah.
we can't force people to understand that.
Yeah, I mean, I come from a country in Tanzania which is not Muslim majority, but I feel like the moment you remove the hijab there, you get harassed, and that's the mindset. And I like, or even in Dubai, when people don't wear the hijab, or they wear the hijab, it's like it's open. But then the moment I didn't wear the hijab, I just had random. So these were not Westerners who were coming up to me. These were not people whose culture don't wear the hijab. These were people whose culture will say, wear the hijab because that's how you're a good woman. So the
Yeah,
people who were approaching me, and I was like, why are you talking to me? Or like, I'm not
exactly.
interested. Like, these are people who want their women to be covered and then will go on to harass other people, the other women. And then you're
Exactly. And
like, sorry, go
it,
on.
it's very harmful to have a norm of hijab, because that's what we see with a lot of men here. By making it the responsibility of the woman to cover herself, they will slut shame any woman who
Yeah.
doesn't uphold their standard, and that is
Yeah.
very, very toxic.
Didn't you see the irony between the Western liberal feminists, in this case, quotation mark, who will go like, no, it's a women's choice. They should be allowed to wear what they want to wear. Yes, okay, yeah, they should be allowed to wear. And like, I tried on the hijab and whatnot. And I'm like, the same men who have enforced it on their women, or the religion in specific that has enforced it on religion, the men of that religion and the women of that religion will not hesitate twice to slut shame you or say that they're better than you because you
Exactly.
don't cover up, and they do.
Exactly.
And it's just so ironic where you're like, you, okay, great, you're in support of their choice, lovely. I'm happy with that. They're not in support of your choice. They're every time I feel like every time when my friends talk about having other Muslim friends and they're like, oh yeah, he gave me a Quran to read, or he gave me this to read, or yeah, he was trying to convert me and telling me more. And then I'm like, oh really? Huh. And like when I talk to that friend, or I have some Catholic friends, I'm like, I never talk about atheism. I never have the need to tell them, oh, did you know God doesn't exist in my worldview? Or it's just like, I see that there's so much love bombing going on. There's so much like, you have to be one of us so that you're pure, that you're accepted, that you're in the right path. And that's how I feel like being a kafir or a murtad, or, being an apostate in our cases, is so looked down upon as compared to somebody who has never been a Muslim.
Absolutely. And the issue here is that when we need to understand why these Muslims do this. It's not because they're hateful. It's because they want to save you from eternal hell, and they are afraid for your safety much of the time, and they want the good deeds from Allah. They want to be like, see God, I did good, not to put me in hell. So in their worldview, but if you put yourself in their shoes, you will understand that it's quite rational from their perspective to do this.
Yeah.
But
I think, sorry, go on.
no, I just want to say, but the issue is that it's an anti-liberal
Yeah.
mindset that is wrong.
And it
Muslims
is,
are wrong in
yeah.
their view, and
Yeah.
we know this.
It's a toxic mindset. It was Zahra from Canada and I were discussing the exact same thing. It's not that it's not that they're lying to you. Um, it's not that they're selling you a false thing. They're selling you something they genuinely believe in because they haven't rationally critiqued their own belief. I've had there's Ashura coming, and I used to be a Shia Muslim, some
Ah,
haram's coming. So, my sisters are prepping for it. So every year they get new sets of black clothes stitched because, your body changes within a year. And they're all talking about it. I'm like, oh, can you get me a skirt stitched, which is black with the same color of your abayas or whatnot, so we can match? And we were talking about it, and they've started sending the family group with a lot of the sayings from Ashura. And I'm like, don't you guys ever think how stupid it was to take your kids to the battlefield? Because that is what Ashura is. Like that is what Ashura is. They took your whole family. So Ashura, for those of you who don't know, is a it's a Muslim thing, but it's specifically that the Shias relate to, where the grandson of Muhammad took his entire family to a battlefield, and then obviously they died because they were outnumbered and I think it's quite stupid. It's like saying, "Oh, you know what? There's a building on fire. Let's just go there. All of us. Let's all of us go there, just so we are known to make a name." Which I feel like, in a way, they were successful because they still have a name. But was it like the wisest choice? No.
yeah, exactly. No, I always get so sad when I see these things where like if they had seen any other religion do these rituals, they would laugh at them.
Yeah.
I also often hear Muslims say, "Oh, Hindus they pray to a monkey god and all that stuff," and I'm like,
How do you
your
not see
religion
it?
is more absurd.
How do you not see it? I was just like, how do you not see the difference? I was just like, how do you not see it? I was just like, it's on a plate for you. And you're like idols and stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then like the Shias also have like they go to the shrines and stuff, and they're like, we're not exactly praying to them. We're just like, it was just like we're just taking it as a symbol. And I'm like, that's exactly
Exactly,
what they're doing. That's exactly what they're doing.
exactly.
They don't actually believe that that idol is the god. They think it's a representation of God. And I'm
Mm.
like, how do you not see that it's the irony. It's so, and then they're like, oh, there's only one God. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. But you pray to a million different people and you idolize other people, and you've like it's so frustrating. Like sometimes I'm just like with my family, I just don't have to talk about it. I'm just like, okay, you guys do what you can. Um, I guess I know I love talking to you about all these ideas. I feel like we connect so well. But I want to know about how you left Islam and what happened after that.
So for me, it actually came in like a wave where I was around 13 years
Mm.
old, and I was like, well, my mom has always put a good, like she has always presented Islam as a very good religion. She's like a wonderful human, and any child who grows up with a mother like mine will just see Islam as the most wonderful religion in the world, because if she uses those morals to live, obviously
Yeah,
those morals must be true.
mhm.
So I was like, oh well, if I'm Muslim, uh, I never do things half-heartedly. I was like, I will not risk going to hell. I will do this into a science. I will look at what I have to do and
Yeah,
do it.
yeah,
So I started looking into it, and surprisingly, I see a lot of inconsistencies. I'm like, what? And I, like school and books, and my parents have always been very loving of the sciences and education, and the things I read about and the things I learn about and the books I read and all that didn't align with the science of this
Yeah.
religion. And for me, that was surprising because Islam is supposed to reveal scientific miracles uh, before the Western world was able to see them. And every time I saw a moral or a scientific inconsistency, I was very troubled.
What
And
were
then
some of the moral inconsistencies that resonated with your critical thinking?
uh, LGBTQ rights for
Mhm.
me was a very big thing. It was very obvious for me from a very young age that you should love who you want to love, and then
Yeah,
also, of course, women's rights and
yeah.
oh, capital punishment. Everything really. I believe it or not, I don't agree with the
Death
I,
penalties?
yeah, the death penalties or any legal idea in the Quran. It's a very medieval way of
Harsh.
thinking. Um, but then I actually went through a period where I was like, "Wait, Inas, you're risking hell here. Are you sure you want to keep questioning this?" And that is when I actually wore the hijab and I stopped listening to music and I discovered myself a lot. I was around 14 at that time. Uh, and became very strict with my religion because I was 14 and I became afraid, as
Yeah,
one does. But as I am a very curious person, and I couldn't keep up that act for too long.
yeah,
Sadly, sadly, no. But yeah, I couldn't keep it up for too long. So at the end, I remember that one day I woke up and was like, I don't believe in this. It was like all the cliche reading Hitchens and Dawkins and Harris, and I just woke up one day and was like, "This is a bunch of bullshit." And I don't remember one day that happened. It was more of a gradual thing.
yeah,
But I know that the day I actually realized that I was around 15.
yeah,
I felt like a weight had been lifted from me
yeah,
because I realized there was no longer somebody up in the sky looking down on me and surveilling my every step. And I also realized that now I could do good deeds without
with
being
a
selfish. And that is
yeah,
something I actually hated, that every time I wanted to do something good,
yeah,
I felt like I was doing it for a selfish reason because I
yeah,
wanted to, and I never felt like I could do anything for goodness sake.
yeah.
Uh,
I
and
remember, sorry, go on.
no, yeah, you go.
I was gonna say, I remember that whenever I had office presence now, I had stopped believing in God-ish. So when this was when I was like 20, 21. And they would buy an alcohol flask, and I was like, I was raised in a way where my dad wouldn't go to restaurants if they served alcohol because they're like, you're buying money for the alcohol, like you're paying for the alcohol.
Yeah,
So I was like, look, I'm not comfortable paying for it. And I just felt like such a big idiot for that, but I was happy, and I'm like, I'll pay for everything else. Like, I'm happy to chip in for something else. I'm like, it just doesn't feel right. And a part of me is really glad that I was able to speak up for myself no matter what that was. That as uncomfortable as that made me in front of other people, that I was able to confront it, because what was worse was me leaving Islam and then confronting it with people who are Muslims. A lot of our friends, a lot of our family, because like a lot of people who knew me before, I was all about, oh, here are my photos, or this is where we went, this is how much fun we had. And now it's like Islam, apostasy, atheists, human rights, women rights. And they're like, and I'm
yeah,
like, just so you know, there's a reason why this is happening every day. There's a reason why we we need to talk about it because we've come. Sudan just removed apostasy laws. You think this would have happened if we all shut up? I'm not saying I'm not saying it's because of me, but this is a collective effort.
because of
Where
us.
we've Yeah, it's because of
Yeah.
all of us. It's because we are fighting. It's because we're saving people. It's because we're enlightening people. And yeah, that might offend you. But what I don't understand is, like, if you're happy with what you believe in, why does what somebody say offend you? Like, why does what I say offend you? Like, I like the color, black. You don't like it. You can say anything about it.
How dare you like black?
Exactly. Like, oh my God, offensive. Um, but yeah, no, that was always a question that, I went like, why does it offend you? Because my family, they don't know apostasy laws. They don't know any of that. But, they were like, how could you leave Islam? And I'm like, do you really want me to get into how he slept with a 6-year-old? Do you really want me to talk about how I don't agree with the morals? And they're like, who do you think created the earth and the sun? And I'm like, wow, we're at that level. We're at that level where you're like, that you feel that somebody should have had to created something for it to exist. Somebody has asked, what is your origin? What is your background?
So my mom is from Palestine, Lebanon, and my dad
Yeah.
is from Jordan, Syria.
Okay.
Um, but I'm Swedish.
Yeah. Yeah, I think with I don't know where I was from. I was told I was Indian, and I didn't know
Mm,
anything about it. So I took an ancestry test, and then that's when I discovered I was like from the borders of Afghanistan and Pakistan, and then a bit of West Indian, and then a bit of African as well, like proper African, um, which is which is so strange because I don't look like. But that's somebody had really asked an important question early on. Um, so, what is your opinion of the contradicting values between Western Muslims and Westerners? Can this be resolved if the Western Muslims hold on so dearly to their ancient values, backed up by their religion?
Short answer, yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Um, Muslims are is Islam is not a death cult. It's for many people it's simply a culture, believe it or not. It
yeah,
is when it goes to a collective that it becomes toxic.
yeah,
And that is what we see again and again. Muslims who are grow up in non-segregated areas are not a threat to society. They are not a threat to our values. And more often than not, they are just like anybody else. And that is usually what the anti-racists want to pinpoint, that Western Muslims are not a threat. And they do it in a wrong way, but they have a very, very important point there. We need to understand that, first of all. Second of all, there's still an issue. And the contradicting values between Western Muslim and Westerners is that uh, Muslims can be have a political view that is very unliberal.
yeah,
What we in the West cannot do under any circumstance is become anti-liberal because of that, because that will not solve anything. If we limit Muslims, we will not help them become more secular and liberal, and we will not help ourselves become more liberal and secular. We need to be accepting, but not fool ourselves about the game they're playing. It's just like when we see extremists in Sweden, for example, we see extremists and Nazis march our street, and they use our liberal values to spread their propaganda,
yeah,
and we use information to spread that this is wrong. But and we're never fooled. But we don't kill them. We don't oppress them. We try to look at the root cause as to why they believe what they believe,
yeah,
and try to change that from generation to generation. No child is born a Muslim. No child is born an extremist. And if society takes its
exactly.
responsibility, no child will grow up to an extremist Muslim.
Yeah. Exactly. I guess that is such an opening and a refreshing view because you're right. I think what's happening with a lot of the far right and the far left is that narratives are being stolen. What is considered to be liberal is actually quite regressive. In the far left, where they're like, "Oh, we're liberating," and I'm like, "No, you're regressing. You're not liberating anyone." And then with the far right, it's obviously I think the far right and the Muslims, extremists and fundamentalists, or the Muslim far right, don't understand how much they have in common, and they still end up hating each other. You're like, oh, do not like homophobia? Check.
Oh my God,
Sorry,
so many times I've
homosexuality.
seen like conservatives in Sweden, like not like just normal conservatives, uh, wannabe alt-righters in Sweden, make the same points I've been fighting my whole life about female impurity, about homosexuality, about all, and I'm like, you fucking fools!
Like,
You
what
are
is wrong with you? They're like,
exactly.
I feel like it's also like the far left and the far right as well. They have so much in common, and I'm like, huh, the irony when you can't see it. When you're like, oh no, they're horrible people, and I'm like, oh okay, so people hurting other people or causing violence or rioting is definitely the way forward, isn't it? Um,
Hmm.
yeah, no, it is absolutely disgusting that a lot of people, the far right, the far left, and the far right talk about killing or completely eradicating people who oppose their ideas versus those ideas. There's a difference between countering people's ideas versus countering people as human beings. And I think what we're not doing enough of is, well, one, talking about controversial ideas. I think we discussed this early on in the podcast, where we're silenced because we don't agree, that we don't talk about it because we're scared of cancel culture, we're scared of losing our jobs. And I think there already are laws in place to protect people, but it is, again, you know, being undermined by how powerful um, I guess the woke culture is, in a way that you can't talk about alternative ideas. I mean, if we look at how women came to liberation or how they're still going, or women's rights, even in the UK, it took some people to oppose those rights. It took some people to provoke those people to then go like, we deserve those rights and we're going to take it. And the fact that just diversity inclusive training, and I feel like it's such an insult when people talk about this is how you should be treating black people, or this is how you should be treating Muslim people. And I'm like, no, 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 I want to be treated the same as you would treat any other person.
Yes, and I want to make one last point here. It's a lot of times I see a lot of people who are like, "Oh, cancel culture. I don't dare to speak against migration or extremism because of cancel culture." And I'm like, you are self-censoring. Like you're censoring yourself here. You live in a free democracy, and in a free democracy, saying controversial points will come with consequences, but not from the state. And if you, in a free society, can't risk the smallest amount of backlash for what you believe in, then you don't believe in anything. You are in a privileged position to fight against anything you find unfair in society. And if you hide behind anonymity, then I honestly believe that you are a coward. And I'm sorry, and that might be a very controversial point because honestly, most often than not, in the Western world, you can express any opinion you want, and that right will not be upheld unless people use that right.
Yeah.
And I and I have a lot of threats with speaking about all these subjects we have spoken about, but I'm 100 times more free than any woman in the Middle East. And if I can't see that, then I've missed the point of freedom.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, which actually ties in perfectly with somebody having an opinion to your question, and it's a valid question. I have one problem with the answer, and is you emphasize the role of the West and their governments in making Muslims more secular. Have the West failed Muslims in your view? Yes. Yes, they have.
Yes,
Yes,
they
they
have
have.
failed them in that they have put control mechanisms where they shouldn't, and they have let them roam free where they should have put some constraints. Um, we should. I strongly believe that humans adapt, and whatever standards you put or expectations you have, people will arise to that occasion. If you expect Muslims to be savages, don't be surprised when a minority are that. But when you expect every Muslim that comes into your country to be a contributing member of society, you will see that as well.
Yeah, I
That's
think
all I have to say.
I think that's a very great response, because I feel like a lot of the people who are like, oh, Muslims in the West are causing um, are the ones who are responsible for extremism in some cases, or Islamic extremism. I think it is the West, like we discussed earlier on immigration and integration, it is the West that have failed to integrate them. Because to be fair, you're talking to people who, for the large part, um, while holding their faith dear, have not been challenged in their ideas in a one-to-one talk where you're not trying to attack them, you're trying to discuss their ideas. And I feel like even as ex-Muslims, I think I have changed quite a bit, but even as ex-Muslims, we need to be better at that. We definitely need to be better at like actually talking about, hey, I don't hate you, but your ideas are ridiculous. So let's talk about it. Or maybe ridiculous is a bit harsh. I still think they are ridiculous. But I'm also a fan of blasphemy. But I think, yeah, it is one of those things that it could be off-putting for so many people when you can't talk to them as human beings and you tend to talk to them as enemies, which I feel every time you go into a debate or a discourse where you don't agree with somebody, I guess you're in a flight or fight mode where you're like, well, I'm just going to start attacking you because I need to be right, versus, hey, let's talk about it. Let's see where we disagree. Let's find a common ground, and let's see if we can leave this with some form of agreement or agree to disagree.
Absolutely. I fully agree. And we must not forget that Muslims have their self, so every individual is responsible for themselves. But wherever the Western world has failed Muslims is that they have taken a very paternalistic view on them. We need to coddle them, and uh, that has a lot. There's a lot of issues in Muslim culture, and we should not be naive to that. And I think the Western world has has woken up a lot to that, and I am actually quite positive to the future ahead of us.
Yeah, I am too. I think the only thing that I am a little disappointed with is the woke culture. But I feel like with the whole BLM movement, that is having a really, really big hit right now. Like a lot of the woke ideas are being countered by a lot of left wing themselves, including myself. I
I
think I
find it
consider
very
myself.
sad that when the Black Lives Matter movement that is like has ground in America comes to Europe, it's like we don't have the same history. Don't bring it here. We don't need
Yeah.
your talking points here.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is that there's a lot of people who keep talking about history but have forgotten all the amazing achievements that the Black community have had, and they still victimize themselves. Not themselves, but they still victimize the Black community there, which is
Yeah.
sad, which is horrible, because you're insulting them again. Like, you're
And
not
many
looking at all the achievements and how far we've come.
and many migrants in Europe then take on that victimization. And I see that in the segregated areas I live in. They take on that victimization and think that the country that has given them housing, education, food, and everything is oppressing them. And when as long as they have that mindset that they are oppressed, they will not succeed in society. Sadly.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ines. It was so lovely. I know we didn't talk much about you, but I think we covered so much of content, which I feel like we could go so have in-depth conversations with in-depth conversations about. Geez, but yeah, it would be nice to have you maybe on a specific topic at some point, maybe on support corner,
I would be
talking about
honored.
Ona culture and your research in a couple of months when you've had a lot of progress made, because I feel like there's so much you have to contribute.
Thank
And thank you so much for coming. Just before I end it, I always ask my guests one question. If there was something you would tell a younger ex-Muslim or a a younger self, or just the younger generation, what would that be?
I would say the same thing Jabril said to Muhammad when he came down to him. Iqra, read, read
Really
books.
good. Really, really good. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
this has been lovely. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been so lovely, and I hope you all the best in everything you do.
Thank you so much. I'm going to end the broadcast and then we'll chat for a bit. Bye, guys.
Bye.